The message was already gone. Sent. Delivered. Cairo Vale stared at his phone screen and felt the exact moment his stomach fell through the floor. 3 words. Typed in rage. Fired without thought. FCKU. I'm done. His chest was still heaving. His jaw still tight from everything that had happened in the last hour. The screenshot his friend had forwarded, the proof sitting right there in full color, the kind of betrayal that doesn't hit you slowly. It hits you all at once. Like cold water. Like a slap you didn't see coming. He'd grabbed his phone. Found the contact. Hit send. Felt good for exactly 4 seconds. Then the name loaded. The screen lagged just slightly. Just enough to make his thumb hover. One small glitch. The kind phones do when they're switching between recent contacts. When the wrong name slides into the field and you don't catch it because your hands are moving faster than your eyes. The name on the screen wasn't his ex. It was Zephan Drax. Cairo didn't move. Didn't breathe. The room around him. His small apartment. His drafting table covered in sketches. His half-eaten dinner going cold on the counter. None of it registered. Just that name. Just those 4 letters sitting at the top of the chat thread like a lit match over dry wood. Zephan Drax. He knew that name the way everyone in the city knew it. Not from a headline. Not from a business card. You knew it the way you knew which streets to avoid after dark. The way you knew which buildings had no cameras and which ones had too many. The Drax name wasn't spoken loudly. It was spoken carefully or not at all. One of 3. Triplet heirs. An empire that didn't exist on paper but ran through half the city's infrastructure like a second skeleton. Cairo's fingers went cold. He scrolled up, desperate, hoping somehow the thread was old. That this contact had been there before, that maybe this was a glitch that could be explained away. But the thread was clean. Brand new. 0 messages before this one. Just his. Just FCKU. I'm done. Hi viewers. Have you ever sent a message to the completely wrong person at the worst possible moment? Drop it in the comments. Because what happens next to Cairo, I don't think any of us would survive. The air in the room felt different now. Heavier. Cairo set the phone down on the edge of the table slowly, the way you set something down when you're afraid the sound of it might wake something up. He needed to think. He needed to breathe. But the phone buzzed before he could do either. He looked down. 3 dots. Zephan was typing. The dots appeared, then stopped. Cairo's hand pressed flat against the table. His pulse was loud in his ears, the kind of loud that fills up all the space in a quiet room. The dots appeared again. Stopped again. He kept his eyes on the screen. Couldn't look away. The way you can't look away from something you already know is going to change things, you just don't know how yet. Some mistakes don't feel like mistakes when you make them. They feel like release. Like finally saying the thing you've been holding so long it burned. But the second the air hits it, the second it lands somewhere it wasn't supposed to go, that's when the weight of it comes back. Harder. Doubled. Cairo understood that now. Completely. The dots appeared one more time. And then the message came through. 2 words. No punctuation. No emotion in the text itself. But somehow, in the blankness of it, in how controlled it read, Cairo felt every hair on his arms stand up. Say that again. He read it 4 times. Say that again. Not who is this. Not wrong number. Not even excuse me. Just that. Flat. Steady. The kind of message that didn't raise its voice because it didn't need to. Cairo knew tone. He was a storyteller. An illustrator who spent his days building emotion into still images. Reading what a line meant. What a shadow said. He understood the difference between anger and threat. Between frustration and warning. This wasn't anger. This was something quieter. That was the part that got him. He typed fast. Hands not quite steady. Wrong person. I'm sorry. Sent it before he could second-guess the wording. Watched it go from delivered to seen in under 3 seconds. Then nothing. He waited. 1 minute. 2. Stood up from the table and walked to his kitchen because standing still felt impossible. Poured water he didn't drink. Set it down. Walked back. Still nothing. The silence from powerful people isn't peace. It's evaluation. Cairo had heard that somewhere once, a line from a podcast, a book he couldn't remember, but it landed now in a way it hadn't before, because that silence on his screen didn't feel empty, felt full. It felt like something happening behind a closed door. He picked up his phone 3 times in the next hour and put it back down each time without opening the app. He tried to sketch, drew 3 lines and stopped, tried to eat, couldn't, put on something in the background, some show he'd already seen, and stared at it without watching. His mind kept pulling back to what he knew, not what he'd heard in gossip. The actual facts, the ones that existed between the rumors. Zephyr Drax, eldest of the 3 by 11 minutes, ran the side of the Drax operation that nobody publicly identified. No social media, no verified profiles, no interviews, just whispers. And Cairo, freelance illustrator, no connections, no backing, the kind of person the city's bigger machines never noticed, had sent that man a rage-type slur at 9:47 on a Thursday night. His phone lit up. His whole body tensed. It was a food delivery notification. He exhaled. Slow. Long. Every buzz after that hit the same way. Like the moment before an answer you're not ready for. His nervous system stuck in that loop, brace, release, brace again. By the time midnight came, there was still nothing from Zephyr. No reply, no follow-up, no threat, just seen. And somehow that was worse than anything else could have been. Because at least with a response, even an angry one, Cairo would know where he stood. This was open-ended. This was the worst kind of waiting. He turned off his lamp, lay back on his bed fully dressed, stared at the ceiling and told himself it was fine. That men like Zephyr got weird messages all the time. That this wasn't worth a second thought to someone operating at that level. He almost believed it. Almost. Then the lights went out. Not just his lamp. Everything. The hum of his refrigerator. The green glow of his power strip. The streetlight visible through his curtain. Gone. Total dark. And somewhere in the distance, faint but real sirens started. The dark came in all at once. No flicker. No warning. Just gone. Cairo sat up in bed and immediately reached for his phone. The screen lit up, gave him 3% battery, and then shut itself off before he could do anything with it. He sat there in the black. No refrigerator hum. No AC. No ambient sound from outside the window except those sirens. Still distant, but more of them now. More than one direction. His building was old. No backup generator for individual units. The hallway light that usually bled under his door? Nothing. Total isolation. It's different, being alone in the dark when your mind was already running. The fear changes shape. Shifts from something digital, a chat thread, a name on a screen, into something physical. Something that takes up space in the room with you. Cairo was not the kind of man who scared easily. He'd grown up stretching every dollar, living in neighborhoods that required a different kind of alertness. He knew how to be still, how to move quietly when quiet was needed. But this was different. He swung his legs off the bed, found his way to the window by memory, looked out. The whole block was dark. 3 blocks, maybe more. Even the traffic lights were out. He could see the intersection from here, just cars slowing and negotiating their own way through. His charger was useless without power. His laptop dead. He was cut off. Completely. Fear changes shape depending on how alone you are. That's just the truth of it. The same situation that's manageable with 1 bar of signal becomes something else entirely when that bar disappears. Cairo found his way back to the edge of his bed. Saturday. Breathed. He was fine. This was a blackout. Citywide, maybe. It would come back. He was fine. He counted his breaths. In for 4. Out for 4. Old trick. It worked, mostly. Until the knock came. Not frantic. Not the way a neighbor would knock. Not even the way someone urgent would knock. 3 taps. Spaced. Deliberate. At his door. Cairo did not move. He sat exactly where he was. In the total dark. and did not make a sound. Listened. Heard nothing on the other side, no shuffle of feet, no second set of taps. Just silence where the knocking had been. He thought maintenance. He thought neighbor. He thought of 12 completely reasonable explanations. And then the voice came through, low, unhurried, like someone talking to themselves and knowing they'd be heard anyway. You send reckless messages for someone who locks their doors like they expect consequences. Cairo stopped breathing, not held his breath. Stopped. Completely. The way your body just locks up when something real breaks through all the noise your brain's been making. He knew that voice. He didn't know how he knew it. He'd never heard it before. He had no recording, no interview, no reference point. But somehow, in the way it moved through the door, measured, unhurried, heavy with something that wasn't anger and wasn't warmth either, he knew exactly who it belonged to. Zephan. Here. At his door. In the dark. Cairo's hand found the edge of his bed frame and gripped it. He didn't stand. Didn't move toward the door. Didn't speak. Every instinct he had said stay still. The way you stay still when you're not sure what the cost of moving is. Silence outside. No second knock. No force against the frame. No rattling handle. Just quiet. The most dangerous people don't need to break in. They wait for you to break first. They let the quiet do the work. They understand that a door between two people only feels like protection, and they know exactly how long it takes for that feeling to wear away. Cairo sat in the dark. A minute passed. Maybe two. Then, a low, mechanical click somewhere below his window. A hum that built slowly. And the lights came back. Not all at once. In a ripple, the hallway first, then his power strip, then the refrigerator catching itself back on with a familiar shudder. The room was light again. Cairo exhaled. Slow. Silent. His eyes went straight to the crack under his door. Shadow or no shadow. Movement or stillness. He watched. Waited. Nothing. He crossed the room in 6 steps. Put his hand on the deadbolt. Stood there for 10 full seconds before he turned it. Opened the door. The hallway was empty. Both directions. Completely clear. No footsteps retreating. No elevator chime. No stairwell door swinging shut. Just the hallway. Lit again. Still, smelling faintly of old carpet and someone's cooking from 3 floors up. Cairo stood in the doorway and looked left. Then right. Then down. On the floor. Centered exactly in front of his door, like it had been placed rather than dropped, was a package. Small. Matte black. No tape, no label, no address. Just sitting there. Like it had always been there. Like someone had wanted to make sure he found it the moment he was ready to look. Cairo crouched down slowly. Picked it up. It was light. Real light. The kind of light that meant one thing. He already knew what was inside before he opened it. He opened it anyway. A phone. Already powered on. The screen glowed softly against the inside of the matte packaging. No case. No charger tucked beside it. Just the phone itself, sleek, expensive in the way that doesn't need branding, the kind of thing you don't find at a retail counter. Cairo carried it inside. Set it on his drafting table under the light. Looked at it the way you look at something when you're not sure if touching it means agreeing to something. He picked it up. One contact. Just one. See? No last name. No number visible. Just the single letter sitting in the middle of an otherwise empty contact list like a period at the end of a sentence. He stared at it. His own phone was still dead on his nightstand. Killed by the blackout and the low battery it hadn't recovered from. He was effectively phoneless except for this. Except for whatever this was. The phone rang. One vibration. Then the screen lit up. Z. Calling. And the sound was low, like the device itself had been tuned differently than anything he'd used before. Cairo's thumb hovered. He thought about not answering. Ran through it quickly, what that would mean, what it would say, whether silence was even an option at this point. He answered. He pressed it to his ear and said nothing. Waited. Silence on the other end. Not empty silence, the kind with breath behind it. The kind where someone is listening just as much as you are. Cairo spoke first. I said I was sorry. He heard it the moment the words left his mouth. How small they sounded. How insufficient. Like handing someone a bandage when you dropped a roof on them. The silence stretched. Then, you weren't wrong. 3 words. Quiet. Even. Cairo pulled the phone back from his ear slightly and stared at the screen like it might explain what he just heard. Then brought it back. What? No answer. Just that same weighted stillness. And in it, Cairo felt something shift. Not dramatically, not all at once. But something. The fear that had been locked in his chest since the moment that name loaded on his screen cracked slightly. Just slightly. Just enough for something else to get in. He didn't know what to call the something else. Sometimes the scariest response isn't anger. It's agreement. Because anger you can argue with. You can push back. You can defend yourself against a raised voice, a threat, a demand. But agreement means the other person already knows something you're still figuring out. Cairo opened his mouth to ask what he meant. But the call was already dead. Screen black. The phone still warm in his hand. And the only contact left glowing on the screen Z. No explanation. No follow-up text. No indication of what came next or when or whether Zephandrax would simply choose to forget that a freelance illustrator in a dark apartment had accidentally redirected his worst moment at the wrong man entirely. Cairo set the phone down. Stared at the ceiling. You weren't wrong. What did that mean? What had he been right about? What do you think Zephan meant by those 3 words? Was it about the message or something deeper? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever said something by accident that accidentally changed your whole life, tell me. The rent notice was gone. Not paid. Not deferred. Gone. Like it had never existed. Cairo stood in front of his building's management office holding his phone, ready to explain why he needed 2 more weeks. And the woman behind the desk looked at him like he'd asked a strange question. Your account is current, Mr. Vale. He blinked. Since when? She turned her monitor slightly. Showed him the screen. Paid. Stamped. Time-stamped 3 days ago. He hadn't paid it. He walked back upstairs slowly, hand on the railing, replaying the last 72 hours. The phone. The call. The 3 words. Then silence. Nothing from the Z contact since the line dropped. No follow-up. No explanation. Just this. He sat at his drafting table and pulled up his email. There. A message from DeMarco Webb, the client who had ignored his last 4 follow-ups. Paid in full. Not the original invoice amount. Double. With a 1-line note, thank you for your patience. Cairo set his phone face down on the table. He needed to think clearly and his brain wasn't cooperating. By Thursday, the alley 2 blocks south, the one he crossed twice a day and always moved through quickly, keys already in his hand, had a new camera mounted at both ends. City branded. Clean installation. Like it had been planned for months and just happened to go up now. He hadn't mentioned the alley to anyone. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hold a press conference. It doesn't send a thank you card. It just edits, quietly removes the friction, solves the problems before you finish forming them into sentences. Cairo understood that now. He also understood something else, something that unsettled him more than the rent, more than the payment, more than the camera. He was being watched. Not in the way that made his skin crawl. Not in the way that made him want to move apartments or change his routine. More like the way you feel when someone is paying close attention. When the air around your daily life feels slightly adjusted. Present. He tested it. Said it out loud in his apartment alone. My laptop charger's been glitching for a month. I need a new one. He said it to nobody. To the walls. To the ceiling. Then he went to sleep. The next morning, a small package sat outside his door. Inside a charger. Exact model. For the specific laptop he owned, the one he'd never discussed, never mentioned, never referenced in any message. Cairo held it in both hands, and stood very, very still. The calls started without a pattern. That was the first thing Cairo noticed. No scheduled time. No warning. The black phone would light up Z. Calling. And it could be 7 in the morning or past midnight or somewhere in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon when Cairo was 3 hours deep into a project and had almost forgotten to be afraid. He always answered. He'd stopped asking himself why. The conversations were short. Never small talk. Zephan didn't seem to own any. But they weren't cold either. They were precise. Observant. The kind of exchanges where the other person has clearly been paying more attention than they let on. Your deadline. Did it move? Cairo had mentioned a client deadline in passing during a call 4 days earlier. One sentence. He'd moved on immediately. Zephan hadn't. You work better at night. The pieces you finish before sunrise are sharper. Cairo had asked how he knew that. A pause. The timestamps on your public portfolio. Simple, factual, and somehow more disarming than any compliment would have been. Cairo started noticing himself doing things he hadn't intended. Leaving a lamp on after midnight. Not because he was working, but because it felt like keeping a window open. Checking the black phone before his regular one in the mornings. Waiting. He caught himself mid-thought one evening and stopped. Waiting. For what exactly? Security feels different when you didn't ask for it. When it wasn't offered to you as part of a transaction, when nobody handed you a contract, when there are no terms to read through. It just exists, quiet and solid in the background of your days. And the longer it sits there, unannounced, uncharged, the more weight it starts to carry. Cairo wasn't afraid of Zephan anymore. He wasn't sure when that had shifted. There was no moment he could point to. It had moved the way temperature moves. Gradually, without announcement, until one day you realize you've taken off your jacket and you don't remember doing it. He sketched more, ate regularly, slept better. One night, the black phone stayed silent. No call. He finished his work, made tea, sat by the window, checked the phone once, twice, put it face up on the table so he'd hear it when it rang. It didn't ring. He went to bed. Lay there, and somewhere between trying to fall asleep and actually doing it, the thought surfaced. Clean and quiet and completely honest. He was disappointed, not relieved that the silence meant nothing was wrong. Not neutral the way he would have been 3 weeks ago. Actually, genuinely disappointed. Like something he'd quietly started depending on had shifted slightly out of reach. Cairo stared at the ceiling. That realization sat heavy. He asked directly. No build-up. No easing into it. The next call came. A Wednesday, late afternoon, Cairo still at his table with an unfinished panel in front of him. And before Zephan could say anything, Cairo spoke first. Why are you helping me? Silence. Not the brief kind. The kind that takes up actual space. The kind that tells you the other person isn't searching for an answer. They're deciding whether to give you the one they already have. Cairo didn't fill it, didn't soften the question. He set down his pen and waited. The tension in that silence was real. The kind you feel in your shoulders, in your jaw. The kind that makes a minute feel like it has extra seconds in it. Then, because you were the first person to speak to me without calculation. Cairo's hand went still on the table. He processed that, ran it back. Turned it over. That wasn't intentional, he said. That message was a mistake. Exactly. One word. And it landed harder than anything Zephan had said since the beginning of all of this. Cairo leaned back in his chair. The lamp above his table buzzed faintly. Outside, a car passed. Normal sounds. Regular city sounds. But the room felt altered. Honesty hits differently when power isn't used to it. When someone moves through the world and every interaction they have is pre-filtered, calculated for what it might produce, what it might cost, what it might reveal, they learn to read intention before anything else. They learn to hear the real question underneath the question. And then someone sends them 3 words in a rage. No strategy, no plan, no awareness of who was on the other end. Just raw, unedited feeling. That matters. Pause on that. because that's what Cairo had given him without knowing it. Not respect born from fear, not interest born from ambition. Just a person, cracked open by something real, firing words into the dark with no calculation at all. I didn't know who you were, Cairo said. Not as a defense, just as a fact. I know. Does that change anything? Another pause. Shorter this time. It's why none of this changed. Cairo exhaled. Slow. Long. He looked at the unfinished panel on his table. A figure standing at the edge of something, mid-step, the background still blank behind them. He'd been stuck on it for days. He wasn't thinking about the background anymore. You said I wasn't wrong, Cairo said quietly. That first call. What did you mean? The silence stretched again. And when Zephan finally answered, his voice was the same as it had been from the beginning. Steady, unhurried, low. And I noticed. The line went quiet. Cairo sat with that, and realized, for the first time since that message had been sent to the wrong name on a broken, grief-soaked Thursday night, he wasn't afraid. Not even a little. Life settled. That was the strange part. That was the part nobody tells you about. That healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just your refrigerator stocked, your deadlines manageable, your sleep uninterrupted. Sometimes it's the absence of dread in your mornings. The way you stop bracing for things. Cairo noticed it first in his work. The illustrations got looser, more confident, less corrected. He stopped second-guessing lines that were already right. His client list grew slowly, organically, the way things grow when you're not desperate. He had space to pick and choose. He thought about his ex less, then rarely, then almost not at all. He thought about the message sometimes, that night, the rage, the glitch, the name that loaded wrong. He turned it over the way you turn over a coin that's been in your pocket long enough to get warm. Not with regret, with something that felt closer to wonder. The calls with Zephan had settled into something he didn't have a good word for. Not friendship exactly, the power difference was too real for that word to fit cleanly. Not transactional. Definitely not that. Presence. That was the closest word. Zephan was present in Cairo's life the way a fixed point is present. You don't always look at it, but you always know where it is. And knowing changes how you move. He thought one afternoon about what would happen if he walked away. If he stopped answering. Blocked the Z contact. Returned to his life as it had been before the glitch, before the blackout, before the package at his door. He sat with that thought for a long time. And the answer he came back to wasn't fear. It wasn't, I can't because of who he is. It wasn't, I'm staying because I have to. It was simpler. The difference between control and care is whether you're allowed to leave. Zephan had never once implied a consequence. Had never made Cairo feel the edges of whatever this was. No walls. No locked room. Just presence. Help, offered without invoice. Attention, given without demand. Cairo could walk away. He understood that fully. He also understood, sitting at his table in the afternoon light with a finished commission in front of him and the black phone quiet beside his coffee, that he didn't want to. Not because he was afraid of what happened if he did. Because of what he'd be leaving. He sat back, exhaled. Then the black phone lit up. Not a call. A message. The first text Zephan had ever sent him. No greeting. No preamble. You're quieter today. Cairo looked at it. Then at his window. Then back at the screen. He hadn't spoken to anyone today. Hadn't posted anything. Hadn't been anywhere his silence would register. He typed back slowly. How do you know that? The 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply came. But Cairo already knew the answer, didn't he? He set the phone down. And for the first time, the feeling that came with being watched wasn't discomfort. It was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. There was no dramatic ending. That's what surprised Cairo most. That closure didn't arrive with noise. No confrontation. No final test. No moment where everything snapped into place like a movie beat. It just became clear. The way things become clear when you stop fighting them. He and Zephan talked that Friday evening longer than usual. The city was settling outside Cairo's window, lights coming on block by block, the particular kind of quiet that comes right after rush hour empties the streets. They talked about small things. Cairo mentioned a piece he was proud of. Zephan asked one question about it, one specific, precise question that told Cairo he'd actually looked at it, actually taken the time. No theater in that, just attention. At some point Cairo said, "I used to think the worst thing that could happen to me was being noticed by the wrong person." Zephan didn't respond immediately. Then, and now? Now I think the worst thing was going so long without being noticed at all. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that settles between two people when something true has been said and there's nothing useful to add to it. Sometimes the person you fear most becomes the place you feel safest. Not because they changed, not because the power they carry disappeared, but because you stopped seeing that power as something aimed at you and started seeing it as something standing between you and everything else. The call ended quietly. No cliffhanger in the goodbye, no loaded pause, just good night from Cairo, and from Zephan, a single sound of acknowledgement, low and unhurried, that somehow said more than a full sentence would have. Cairo set the phone down, looked at his apartment, really looked at it, the drawings pinned to his board, the lamp he'd started keeping on, the mug still warm in his hand. He'd rebuilt something here, not repaired the old version, built something new. His regular phone buzzed. An unknown number, no area code he recognized. He almost didn't answer. He did. Silence on the other end, but a different silence. Not Zephan's silence. Something with different weight, different temperature. Then a voice. Not Zephan's. Similar in tone, in the particular stillness of it, but distinct. A different cut of the same stone. "Interesting," the voice said. Just that. And the line dropped. Cairo stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, the dial tone already gone. His eyes moved to the black phone on the table. Dark screen. No incoming call. No message. Whatever that was, it hadn't come from Z. He thought about Zephan's voice, the careful way he carried himself through a sentence, the economy of his words. Wondered, for the first time, what it meant to be one of three. To share a face with two other people who moved through the world with the same quiet authority. Two brothers. Watching. With their own perspectives. Their own questions. And one of them, for a reason Cairo didn't yet understand, had just made their first move. You weren't the only one who noticed him. If this story moved something in you, if you've ever had a moment where a mistake cracked open something you didn't expect, share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories coming. Stories that stay with you, stories that challenge you, stories worth sharing. Don't miss what's next.